Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex. Anthony Rivardo sitting right next to me in New York for first time in a while, because of COVID and everything. And a good time to be with Giants starting training camp today. We have the rookies attending. Hopefully Kadarius Toney is all set to go and can really get rid of these awful narratives that he is, for some reason, a buster, not wanting to go to practice and all the crazy stuff with the cleats and stuff. Put it behind him. Show up. Don't miss a millisecond of training camp and be ready to go. I'm excited for it. I know you guys are. The start of the season's right around the corner. Training camp is starting now. Of course, we have the injured players and quarterbacks showing up tomorrow. And then next Tuesday, the rest of the team will come, and we're going to have the full squad. I'm excited. The players are. And Anthony, how's it going in New York for the first time in a while? And are you excited for the season?
Of course, I'm excited. It's going really good. Happy to be here in New York City, doing our first in-person podcast. That's pretty exciting stuff right now. So, kind of 7,000 subscriber special, we'll call it. So thank you all for helping us reach 7,000 subscribers. We really appreciate all the love and support you give us. And I'm excited, man. Training camp is finally here. I can't wait for it to kick off. And then, once that starts, really quickly we get into preseason, and then the regular season is right around the corner. So I'm very, very excited heading into training camp.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for. Free agency was exciting. We got Kenny Galladay, John Ross, and the draft, of course, Azeez Ojulari, Kadarius Toney, some of these really high-end players that we hope will make an impact in year one. But now it's time to put it to the test. Now it's time for these players to really put it into perspective for us in person and get some good growth as we head into the 2021 season. But this episode, we want to focus on the main position battles during training camp because that's really what we're going to be looking at, the position battles. Some of these guys in these positions just simply aren't ironed out yet. Of course, we have the outside linebacker group, which has 4 new players in Afadio Denabo, Ryan Anderson, Lorenzo Carter's coming up from injury, Ocean Eximines coming back from injury, Ellison Smith, and Azeez Ojulari. This group, I have no idea who's going to emerge as the starters. I have my opinion on who will, but really it's going to be a competition. It's going to be a battle to see. It's going to be a war between these guys to really emerge as starters. I think Afadio is kind of going to be a sub-package guy. In terms of how they utilize him moving forward, because he has experience at OLB, but he's not primarily, fit for that spot. He's a little bit bigger, more of a power guy on the interior. So I think that, that's a big one. Offensive guard's another one, but we're going to start off here today with the first one on the list, and that is Darnay Holmes versus Aaron Robinson in the slot cornerback spot, because that is a position last year that we saw serious issues. Once Darnay Holmes went down with the injuries, we didn't have another slot corner to fill the spot. We tried to kind of utilize Xavier McKinney there to supplement his loss, and it just simply wasn't enough. We didn't have the adequacy and the talent behind Darnay to hold it down, and we had a big hole there. So now we go out, we draft an aggressive cornerback out of UCF, Aaron Robinson, who is not only a good corner and aggressive man coverage guy, but also is good against the run, and that's what you need from a slot corner, the ability to step up and be physical in the running game, Anthony. So when you're looking at these two players, what are the differences that you see? And who do you think will emerge victorious in this position battle?
I think it's going to be kind of depending on what sub-package they want on the field. I don't think anyone's going to emerge victorious. I think both of these players are going to play 2 very different roles from the slot cornerback position. When the Giants are playing more zone coverage and they need that quick twitch reactionary guy, that's Darnay Holmes. When they're playing man coverage, they need a physical corner that can go out there and press a wide receiver. That's Aaron Robinson. And I think that's how they're going to be utilized this season, just kind of based on what the defense wants to do in terms of its coverages, and then, of course, what the offense is putting out on the field. If there's a lot of running from the opposing offense, you can bet that you're going to see Aaron Robinson. He's a phenomenal run defender. He had 80-plus run defense grade each of his last 2 seasons in college per Pro Football Focus. Really good run defender. But I love what Darnay Holmes brings in coverage. Just sitting there in those zone coverages, has really good reaction skills. We saw that with his interception that he had, and he also batted down another pass that turned into an interception. I believe that was against the Seahawks. Yeah, he's really good at all of that, and so I just think there's kind of like a fire and ice dynamic between those 2 players, which means that they'll both see the field just at different times. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be one player's a starter and the other isn't, because technically, slot cornerback isn't even a starting position, but who will get more snaps? Right now, I want to lean towards Aaron Robinson just because I know that the Giants are trying to get into this more man coverage defense. Patrick Graham has said that numerous times. So I do think that Aaron Robinson gets more snaps, but I do think that both of them are going to see a pretty large sum of snaps, and they're both going to have their own impact on the game.
Yeah, I mean, this team is kind of going to be centered around the physicality of the defense, right? We know with Jabril Peppers, with Leonard Williams, some of these big guys, Dexter Lawrence, Blake Martinez, they're hard-hitting guys, intense players, and they bring a lot of energy to the field. And I think that they want to kind of base the entire mentality of the team around the physicality, the intensity of that unit specifically. And it's going to hopefully bleed over into the offense that really lacked that physicality and that element last season. Bringing in a big possession receiver like Kenny Galladay will hopefully add that next level, especially when we're looking at a downfield-centric approach. But, when it comes to Darnay Holmes and Aaron Robinson, I kind of get the sense that Aaron Robinson is going to be the favorite here, even though he's a rookie and Darnay Holmes has that year of experience. Don't get me wrong, love Darnay. I think he's going to be a great player. But the way that Patrick Graham seems to be putting this defense together in terms of being more man coverage based and really focusing on aggressive corners, Aaron Robinson fits that bill to a T. The Giants traded up, mind you, skipping over Dallas and the Eagles to grab Aaron Robinson specifically because he's a scheme fit for them. He fits a mold. And worst case scenario, Darnay starts the year, which is a damn good case. And you have Aaron Robinson as a backup reserve guy, kind of like filling in maybe different packages. And they, if they're playing more man coverage, maybe he fits the bill. If they're playing a little bit more zone this game, maybe Darnay Holmes plays a little bit more zone. They can kind of shift back and forth depending on what scheme they want to run. But like Anthony said, this is not primarily a starting spot. This is really if you have a great slot corner, or rather a slot receiver on the opposite field, maybe Cole Beasley-like. There's tons of great guys, Tyler Lockett. So there's so many great slot guys in the NFL, similar to Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney. You need good slot corners, fast, athletic corners to stop these guys. And we saw actually during the Senior Bowl, Kadarius Toney and Aaron Robinson go up against each other 1v1, and Aaron Robinson made a phenomenal play. He gets burned initially off the line of scrimmage, but he catches up Kadarius Toney and creates an awesome pass breakup, like high points it and everything. It was a phenomenal play. He really played through the body, and it was really aggressive and physical, and that's what you want to see. Kadarius Toney completely destroyed him off the line of scrimmage, but the catch-up speed that Aaron Robinson had is what stood out to me in the willingness and the reliance on his fundamentals. He didn't forget about the fundamentals. He didn't, lose sight of that. He worked with what he had to, that Kadarius Toney was giving him, and he managed to make an awesome play. So I think there's going to be a lot of iron sharpens iron type of mentality during training camp. These guys are going to be making each other better, but I'm so excited to see how they continue to improve here. But that's just the first position battle, and I think that's going to be a really exciting one. The next one I want to talk about is outside linebacker, Anthony. When you're looking at Azeez Ojulari, Ellison Smith, those two guys specifically, those are the rookies. Do you think that the rookies have a good shot at even making it to the starting team, or do you think they'll be more rotational to open the year?
I think that Azeez Ojulari will be a starter by year's end. I think he starts off as a rotational pass rusher, as most rookie edge rushers do, but I don't think it's going to take long for him to cement his place as a starting edge rusher on this team. Our edge talent, we have a bunch of edge guys, but none of them are really solidified starters. A lot of them are backups or rotational guys, and I think that Azeez Ojulari, when I watched his film from college, I think that he absolutely has the ability to be a premier pass rusher. He can be, your every down pass rusher, edge rusher. And so I do think that it's only going to take a few weeks for him to establish himself as that player and become, a starting edge rusher on this team. With Ellison Smith, I see him being more of a rotational or even just backup guy. I don't even think he'll really see the field defensively all that often. But what I do think for Ellison Smith is that he will make an impact on special teams. He had 2 blocked kicks in college, and I think they're going to try and put him down there on the field goal blocking unit as soon as his rookie season starts. Get him acclimated to that position in the NFL, and I think that he's actually a player that could potentially block some kicks or punts pretty early on in his career. It seems like he has a knack for that. So, and he has that ridiculously long wingspan that we all know about. He's super tall, long wingspan. I think he's a perfect special teams player, and I think that's probably what Joe Judge and the Giants were, what they had in mind when they saw Ellison Smith on their draft board. They probably were like, perfect special teams player, got to have him. We know how much of an emphasis the Giants put on their special teams unit. So love that fit for Ellison Smith. But for Azeez Ojulari, I think give it 3 weeks tops, and he's going to be a starting edge rusher on this team.
Yeah, Ellison Smith has that kind of superior athleticism that you want in your pass rusher that they can kind of develop behind the scenes. He's been working nonstop all offseason and really working out to make sure he's ready for training camp. He's going to be in great shape, so I have no doubt about that. But Ellison Smith, like you mentioned, he can make an impact blocking kicks and really putting some pressure on opposing kickers right off the bat. And at the very least, they can use him as a rotational piece on defense against maybe more heavy-footed offensive tackles, where he can use his athleticism, his speed, and get up off the line of scrimmage to really take advantage He has a really great jab step to the outside and then bursting inside. He's really quick and strong from that point. But he does lack that functional strength to bull rush, right? He's not going to be an adequate bull rusher right off the bat. They might have to get some more size and lower body strength because he does have really skinny legs, but he has a pretty nice upper body. And I think that's where he's going to thrive against heavier offensive tackles that might thrive against the bull rush. That's like kind of like they're better against bull rushers. He might be able to expose those weaknesses. If maybe an offensive tackle doesn't have great footwork, he might be able to expose that because of how quick he is. I think that's where they'll see that he is that beneficial. And I think they will find usages for him throughout the season because, of course, last year injuries occurred and then you have to supplement what and whatnot. Azeez Ojulari, on the other hand, he's coming on as a refined pass rusher. People were projecting him to the Giants at 11, ended up going at 50. We got an extra third-round pick out of trading back. I can't believe he fell that far. We are extremely lucky. He could be one of the bigger steals of the draft class. He led the SEC last year with sacks, 9.5, and forced fumbles with 4. So he is a tremendous talent. We know what he brings to this team. He had a torn ACL in the past, but it seems like he's completely, healed from that. That's another testament to Saquon Barkley's return. Torn ACL completely. They can come back 100% healthy and not affect them at all. So I think that is a good reason to believe why Saquon could make this comeback. Especially look at Adrian Peterson. You can look at a ton of players who have made comebacks. Dalvin Cook is another great example. Azeez Ojulari, though, has fantastic bend, fantastic athleticism. He's like 20 years old. He's best friends with Andrew Thomas. They've been working all offseason together. And I think that's like the iron sharpens iron before training camp. That's why I'm so excited about this team because they're spending all of their extracurricular time and their offseason working to improve their own games and really working alongside each other. They're not just working with like random other players and coaches, which is totally fine. But they're actually going out of their way to make sure that they, work together to improve. And I think that stands out to me personally. And I think that it's going to make sure that they are ready for training camp and the regular season. Plus, just Andrew Thomas having a preseason and everything in between, I think it's going to be a huge benefit. So moving on from the outside linebacker group now, I do think Carter and Ocean Exhibits will have an impact. Carter more so than Exhibit. He's kind of getting left behind there. But the next one, this is a really interesting one for me. Nate Solder versus Matt Peart. These two guys have the ability to win the starting right tackle spot. Now, I think Matt Peart will win based on his youth, based on the fact that, he gained a lot of muscle mass this offseason, based on the fact that he'll have a full offseason with training in person with Rob Sale, Pat Flaherty, and just the continuity that he's going to bring, hopefully, to this offensive line. And then, Nate Solder not playing right tackle since like 2011. It's been a long time since he played on the right side. Plus, he opted out last year, so he's a year removed from football. It's going to be tough for him to get acclimated quickly, but he is a veteran, so I think he will. But I think they want to roll with youth. They want Matt Peart to be the future there. They don't want to give Nate Solder, who's on a one-year depth deal type of thing, they don't want to give him snaps if they don't have to. So I want to imagine they're all in on Matt Peart, and they want him to be the starter, Anthony. But, do you see Matt Peart as ready? Do you think he is ready for that step forward? Because I know his pass blocking was shady at sometimes. Run blocking looked good. But pass blocking, we need to protect Daniel Jones first and foremost. And Nate Solder might offer more in pass blocking. So how do you think this unfolds?
Yeah, I do think that Matt Peart is ready, and I project that he will be the starting right tackle this season. I think that Nate Solder gets used as, kind of the jumbo tight end swing tackle role, where when they have an extra offensive lineman on the field, you're talking about having Nate Solder on the field as that extra offensive lineman. Either that, or he's just going to be a backup. He can play on the left, he can play on the right. So that's quality depth to have, similar to Zach Fulton, who we have at guard/center. He can kind of play every position on the interior. He's actually started too. Yeah, he started games at left guard, center, and right guard before, so he can play anywhere there. Same thing with Nate Solder. He can play left tackle. He can play right tackle. So I think that's where Nate Solder comes into play. That's a pretty high price tag to pay for a backup offensive tackle, but it's kind of the situation we're in. We signed him to be a big-time starter, and, now after being removed from football for a year, I think that he's just going to have to accept this backup role or this jumbo tight end, swing tackle role. But for Matt Peart, I do think it's really interesting that his pass blocking grade and his pass blocking statistics last year were kind of shady, because when you look at his college film or you read his draft reports, like his little profiles before the draft, he was a good pass blocker. That was his strength. Run blocking was where he had some room for improvement because he wasn't very strong. He really lacked strength coming into the NFL, and it showed up on tape quite a bit, but he had really quick feet, and he had very good technique, at least from his lower half. in terms of pass protecting and his pass sets. His feet were just phenomenal. But it was his upper body strength that was giving him trouble at times, and sometimes his hands as well were giving him a little bit of trouble. And we kind of saw that stuff multiply once it got to the NFL. It just got a little bit worse, but he was still a solid player in his 150 snaps. Don't get me wrong. I was really impressed by him. Being a third-round rookie coming in and playing as well as he did was super impressive and bodes really well for his future. I think he will be a long-term starter for the Giants, and I think this is his first year starting. But to really circle back around to my original point about the pass blocking issues he had last year, I think that was more of a coaching problem, Mark Colombo, because we saw the same problem with Andrew Thomas, who was a phenomenal pass protector in college, gets to the league, his form changes completely. His technique is just completely different, and it screws him up, and his pass protection was terrible. And I think that's kind of what happened to Matt Parrott as well. I think his technique was changed by the coaching staff, and it kind of screwed him up because, like I said, his feet were amazing. It was his strength. But to add on to that, I've seen pictures of him this offseason. The dude just looks stronger. He looks bigger. He's more muscular. He looks like the mountain from Game of Thrones, as Alex always likes to say. So I think that bodes really well for his future and his ability to alleviate his biggest weakness of being a little bit weaker, not having that functional strength as an offensive tackle. Looks like he's fixed that problem, and it looks like now he's ready to be a starting right tackle, and I think he's going to be a damn good one at that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a picture of Matt Peart standing next to Walt Hernandez, and Walt Hernandez is a big-ass dude, right? He's a huge guy, and Matt Peart made him look like a midget. Like, it was, like, straight up, like, I was like, holy crap, this guy is not only tall, but he's bigger, like more, like, wide than Will Hernandez, too, at his shoulders and stuff, and it's just like, I mean, you see, like, Mekhi Becton, that guy is massive, and the injury issues he had, but Matt Peart, like, traditionally has been healthy. Last year he just got COVID, which, that hurt a bunch of players. So I think him coming in with more muscle mass, more functional strength, better, he already has good feet. He's going to eat people alive in the running game. That is where I want to see him at the second level, just moving bodies, right? Just straight up like Saquon behind him, and he's just leading the charge because he's like two people at once, right? He can take up two blockers, or two tacklers, rather. So I think that him and his strength and agility and speed, he has all of the tangible traits to be that your bookend right tackle for the next 5 to 10 years. We just need to get his technique to the point where it's adequate, right? You can't teach the type of athleticism he has. That's the big thing for me. So I'm really excited to see what he can accomplish this upcoming season. And with Nate Solder, the only reason that he's still here is because we got screwed with his contract because of COVID. It got pushed a year. He was willing to rework it. The Giants are a pretty loyal franchise. We've seen over the years, they don't really trade players away very often, unless you're OBJ. Then, of course, Dave Gettleman was quick to do that one. But there are times when it's happened, but for the most part, the Giants are a very respected franchise, especially now, after last season. I feel like the respect has returned, like the return of the king if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. I feel like Aragorn's come back to reclaim the throne. Joe Judge, even though he's never really been associated with the team, but I feel like he is leading this team toward a better future. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, whereas before I was falling into the deep abyss of the Mariana Trench. And the Giants finally are emerging into a team that we can actually be excited about. And usually we're just excited to watch football. We're excited for just football to return and the Giants to play. But now I'm excited because I feel like they can win. I feel like we actually last year I was like, we probably won't. I remember doing the projections last year saying we're probably not going to be a playoff team, but maybe we'll get close. This year I'm like, we're a playoff team. I feel like we have the talent and the coaching staff to be a playoff team. We just have to put it on the field. We just have to translate it. It's kind of like the Milwaukee Bucks if you watched the finals yesterday. They had a couple, Giannis, he's their best player by a far, arguably the best in the league. Then they have a couple great complementary pieces like Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday. The Giants have a couple of those big elite players like Saquon, like Kenny, like Leonard Williams, if you want to categorize him, like James Bradbury. And that now they have a bunch of, complementary pieces and the depth, the Bobby Portises of the world, like the Julian Loves. Those depth pieces that can come in and play well if you need them to, mitigate fatigue and whatnot. So I think that is where the Giants, they went a step further. They got better this offseason, not only because they added guys like Adoree Jackson and Kenny Galladay and Kadarius Toney, who are immediate starters, but they added great depth pieces too. Aaron Robinson, if he ends up being a depth piece, great depth piece. Julian Love's one of my favorite utility players on this team. Ellison Smith, a great rotational piece to help the special teams as well. Look at our wide receiver core. We're talking about John Ross, Dante Pettis, Austin Mack, and David Sills, quality guys competing for our wide receiver 5 and 6 spots. Talk about a deep unit. That's where our wide receivers are now in a position where last year we had undrafted free agents starting by the midway point, Alex Mack. And now we have them fighting for the back end of the roster. So talk about a turnover, tremendous growth. And they did such a phenomenal job adding personnel. That gets me really excited for this upcoming season, guys. But let's look at the next group here, and it is the wide receivers in the back end with Ross, Pettis, C.J. Board, Mack, and Sills. Now, personally, I think that Ross and Pettis have an advantage here. Why? Because they both have applications on special teams. John Ross can be a very good punt returner. In fact, I'd probably prefer him to be a punt returner over Kadarius Toney just to start, because Kadarius Toney is still getting his sea legs. I don't want to get him too incorporated before he really gets the offense down. I'll get him to focus on offense before you put him in the special teams role. John Ross has tons of experience at that role. And he has the speed. If he makes the roster, I'd like him to be that's where he's going to make the roster. He's not going to be starting. We have Darius Slayton. I think Darius Slayton is a starter as well over Ross. Hopefully, if Ross does make it, it's because of that special teams application. Now, Dante Pettis can also be a kick returner. So it really might come down to who looks better as kick returner during training camp. That in preseason, that really might be the deciding factor of who makes this roster, who makes this team. The Giants did give John Ross, I think, a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. So they did pay him a couple of million to be on this squad. They obviously see him as a gadget-style player who can offer more downfield application as well. Of course, we went out and hired Russ Callaway to be another offensive assistant to really bring that Air Coryell air raid system to the Giants and help apply it, Anthony. So when you're looking at this wide receiver group, who are you thinking makes this roster? Do you think John Ross can do it, or do you think Dante Pettis might be able to sneak his way in there?
I think my favorite is Dante Pettis because I really like the way that he played towards the end of the 2020 season. I think him and Daniel Jones had a couple of nice connections, and I really was impressed by the way he played. I remember that touchdown pass that he caught against the Dallas Cowboys in Week 17. It was a really good throw down the seam by Daniel Jones, and he kind of has that speed to go vertical, but he's also kind of a refined route runner. Nothing, elite, but he's pretty good. And I just think he's all around. He's got good size, strength. I like Dante Pettis the best. I feel like with John Ross, of course, he had such a high expectation when he was drafted in the top 10 by the Cincinnati Bengals. He was either always hurt or he wasn't really a good route runner. I think there's a lot of, bust potential. He's already a bust, but in terms of the signing with the Giants, we all want him to be this really good backup, but I don't really know if he can be more than just a gadget player. I know everyone wants to call Kadarius Toney a gadget player. Kadarius Toney has great hands. John Ross doesn't necessarily have the best hands.
He's tiny little hands.
Kadarius Toney, yeah. And Toney can run routes underneath. John Ross, you're going vertical or you're not going anywhere, and that's a problem for the Giants because now, especially since they already have the vertical threat with Kenny Galladay, he's the guy who's going downfield, but he can do it all, right? And he's actually good going vertical. John Ross, he's either outrunning the defense or he's just doing nothing, and that's where I kind of see him potentially getting cut, as we inch into preseason and get closer to regular season. I could see him getting cut. I like C.J. Board because I think he's a solid security blanket underneath. He's always been reliable. Doesn't really have much of a drops problem. I've seen him make some good contested catches as well.
He's
him
average.
And Daniel Jones have a pretty good connection. Yeah, he's your average backup receiver, and he's cheap. So I think C.J. Board should stay. I agree. And I think Austin Mack provides a lot as a run-blocking wide receiver, and he is a very good underneath slot guy as well. So I like him a lot. If there's anyone that I had to cut, I guess it's probably Sills because I know nothing about him, and he was injured. I have heard good things as well, and I do think that John Ross has the highest potential of getting cut between those guys who are really fighting for that 5th spot, just because his playing style is so limited. He just doesn't have a lot of tools in his bag. He can't really do much more than just outrun a defense. Right. So Dante Pettis, I feel like, just provides more to an offense, so I prefer him over John Ross.
Yeah, Dante Pettis had a couple of nice snags toward the end of the year last year, and you saw there was one against San Francisco. No, sorry, there was one, I forget who it was against toward the end of the season, and all I remember was Dante Pettis. Our receivers just didn't have that. They weren't taught to come back. When Daniel Jones rolled out of the pocket, the receivers sometimes just would stand there. It was against Baltimore. Against Baltimore, and our receivers would just stand there. They wouldn't run secondary routes if the pocket collapsed and Daniel Jones was on the run. Sometimes they just stand there and do nothing. Dante Pettis, coming from San Francisco, was taught, you always got to run that second run. You always got to be proactive. And he did. And Daniel Jones had arguably his best throw of the year running away from his body, running toward the sideline, opened up his hips, and used that arm angle and threw an absolute dart to Dante Pettis on the sideline for a first down. And I was like, damn, like I didn't know Daniel Jones could do that. But you start to realize that the only reason he was able to do that is because the receiver gave him the opportunity to do that. So I think for the most part, the Giants do have the talent now to really open up Daniel Jones's process and open up his talents to another level. But I do see what you mean, that Dante Pettis can be that good of a player. He got a touchdown against Dallas up the seam. Really nice catch. He made a couple of splash plays at the end that, in my opinion, are deserving of another look. We need another good average player to be behind the scenes. And I'd say at the top of his game, he's a little bit above average. And having that as a depth piece, again, attests to how good this Giants team really is when you look at all the different pieces they have and so much reserve talent. Let's move on to the next and final position battle that really heightens at this preseason point. Lemieux and Hernandez versus Zach Fulton. Is this really a position battle? I would say yes, based on the fact that Shane Lemieux, we cannot trust him. Do I want to trust him? Absolutely. Do I want him to be the best player that he can be? Absolutely. I think Walt Hernandez will probably have that right guard spot locked up based on his experience, based on the fact that he's probably been about an average player. Nothing worse, nothing better. He's been about average, and the Giants, that's okay. The offensive guards, like, if you have an average guard, like, you can get away with having an average guard. It's when the tackles are bad. That's when things really fall apart. So Lemieux, though, he was decent in the run game because they ran this power trap scheme that, really required those guards to pull across the formation. And he had the speed and athleticism to get across pretty adequately and use his size at the second level and really to hit those C gaps. So what I think with Shane Lemieux, though, is eventually they're going to have to make a decision is if his pass blocking efficiency is a liability or not, because that was what really showed up on tape last year. He was really, really bad in pass blocking. Can the Giants afford to roll with him if he continues to struggle in that category? He's been working a lot, going in really early to work with the Giants, coaching staffs and really upgrade that portion of his game. But who knows until we see it on the field if he's going to actually make that step forward. When I'm looking at Zach Fulton, though, he has experience. I know he was hit with the most sacks in the league last year, but again, Deshaun Watson is a guy who runs around in the pocket constantly, and the sacks sometimes are a repercussion of him doing that. When he runs around and the whole pocket breaks up and he's just running for his life and he gets sacked, someone's got to get hit with the sack, and sometimes Zach Fulton was that guy. He was the one that was liable. Again, though, I'm not really a proponent of a competition battle involving two guys who borderline suck at this point in time. Like, we didn't really do much to replace Kevin Zeitler. Now, from what I've seen from Zach Fulton and Shane Lemieux, they're both You know what I mean? Can they be good? Absolutely. Can Shane Lemieux end up being a great player? Absolutely, and that's what we're hoping for. But right now, I can't say that they are. I can't say that either of them are adequate players. So, interesting position battle that they've curated there. We'll see what happens. Hopefully they bring the best out of one another. But I am confident that this offensive line is going to take a step forward. But by how much, that's what we're going to find out.
Yeah, I'm seemingly much higher on Zach Fulton than the rest of the fan base. I actually do see him as an adequate starting offensive lineman. He's started at left guard, he started at center, and he started at right guard. And if you go back just to 2-3 years ago, his stats are far better than this past season. Like, he was a pretty good guard for the Houston Texans. And he also played with the Kansas City Chiefs early on in his career, and he was a solid player there as well. For the most part, throughout his career, he's always been average, just hovering right around there. Sometimes slightly above, sometimes slightly below. But this is the only year where his stats make him look like he was well below average. But if you really dive deep into those stats, I think he had the most sacks allowed from any guard. But if you look at his pressure rate, it's about half of what Shane Lemieux's was. So those pressures were getting turned into sacks, which could be a product of the quarterback play. Maybe Daniel Jones gets the ball out of his hands a little bit quicker, is a little bit better under pressure of actually throwing the ball, and Deshaun Watson is just a little bit better of actually taking the sacks. We did see times last year where Daniel Jones should have taken sacks, but he just throws it up and it becomes an interception, and that gets logged as just a pressure, but not as a sack on the stat sheet for Shane Lemieux, right? That's an example of that. But for Zach Fulton, he's playing with a really good quarterback in Deshaun Watson who knows when to take a sack. Maybe there were times where he just took a sack, but his pressure rate, the amount of pressures that he allowed, was actually far less than it was for Shane Lemieux. Shane Lemieux, I think, if I remember correctly, hit on true passing sets, which is one-on-one blocks, no play action, nothing like that, just one-on-one blocking. On his true passing sets, he allowed a pressure on, I believe, 15 to 16% of those snaps, which is just an enormous number. That is inflated beyond the average by far. That is just horrible. Like, you cannot win games if your guard or your tackle, whoever, is allowing true passing sets, pressures at a 15% rate. That is horrible. And Zach Fulton wasn't anywhere near that number. I believe he was closer to around 8%, which is still just a little bit high. You really want like 5% or below. And if you look back to Will Hernandez's rookie season and his second season, both of those were underneath 5%. But this past season, it rose. I think it was closer to 10%. Will Hernandez really struggled this past year. And my problem with him is, and if you watched my latest Tony's Takes mini-series offensive lineman breakdown on Will Hernandez, year to year to year, Will Hernandez has just gotten worse statistically. Like, every single year, he's just declined. And this regression year to year is super concerning. My biggest question for him, which I mentioned in that video, is can he return to form? Can he get back to his rookie season playing style? Like, can he get back to that performance level? I'm not so sure, but I do think that this competition will help to bring out the best in Will Hernandez. And I think switching to the other side of the line, training, he's also, like Matt Peart, added a lot of strength and looks just a lot more clean cut. It looks like he might have dropped a lot of weight, can be a better pulling guard, which we need in this offensive scheme. I think that Will Hernandez will bounce back. I think he is going to solidify himself as one of those two starters. But Shane Lemieux, I don't have as much faith in him as most Giants fans seem to have. I think that Zach Fulton ultimately will become the starter at that left guard spot, and I think it's deserved. I think that he is the better, more consistent player throughout his career. I understand Shane Lemieux only played a half of a season, but what we saw there from his pass protection standpoint was really poor, and we're going to need to see him really improve this second season. And of course, I did mention earlier with Matt Peart, there was an obvious coaching problem that was leading to poor pass blocking from all of our offensive linemen. Hopefully that was the case for Shane Lemieux. Hopefully he can be better with better coaching. I really think that, he's got that ability in him. He is very athletic from the guard position. So maybe he can turn it around and become a good offensive guard. That's my hope. But ultimately, my money is on Zach Fulton to actually take over for the starting position at some point during the season, just because what I saw from Shane Lemieux, some of that stuff doesn't even look like it can be fixed. It was really bad in his rookie season, but I hope he does fix it, and I hope that he does become the starter long term. That would be really nice if we had a bunch of first and second year players right now just become long-term starters. That'd be beautiful. That'd be super cheap and be super huge, super good going long-term, just having these talented players grow together. I hope, but I like Zach Fulton a lot more than most of you, and I think that he's good enough to be a starter.
Well, why do you think they just spent so much money in free agency this year? Probably because they feel good about their offensive line. They know they're not going to spend a ton of money in the future. So keep that in mind. That could have been a thought process in this free agency where they spent like 150 plus million guys. So with Will Hernandez, I'm actually a big proponent of him taking a step forward. I think that he got COVID last year. His coach, Duke Manyweather, told me via Twitter that he was injured as well. So, going through two offensive schemes in 3 years, especially with COVID, being injured and everything in between, it affects you in multiple different ways, guys. But I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fireside Giants with Anthony in person in New York. We hope to catch you on the next one. Make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify as always, my friends, and we will see you tomorrow.